you were constantly putting yourself in positions where you didn't have necessarily everything figured out.
No.
And sometimes you're not even the technical person. But you constantly put yourself in positions where you were like, you know what, I'm going to figure it out. And you trusted yourself to figure it out.
Yeah.
And there's that imposter syndrome.
Yes, totally.
Piece to it. Now, I've also observed with other colleagues, and this might be like a gross sort of generalization, but women typically tend to, till they don't have everything figured out, they don't want to put themselves constantly in that position. That's why they don't get promoted. And something that you are constantly doing inherently is you're like, you know what, let me try this out. Let me figure it out. I'm just going to challenge this is how we've always done it mentality.
Exactly.
And that's helped you grow in your career.
Absolutely.
So how did you wrestle with this like imposter syndrome and this mindset? And then how has that helped you grow so fast? And that could be advice for especially women listening or other people who are struggling with this sort of limiting belief.
So it's not only did I have a huge sense of imposter syndrome of my own, just based on the fact that I'm like, I don't know if I understand this. Like, what if I'm giving them the wrong? It was not only that, it was the imposter syndrome piece of feeling like I didn't have the credibility I needed. But on top of that, we had a leader at that time. This would have been probably I spent 7 years at Symantec. It would probably have been about 5 years in, 3 or 5 years in, who kept insisting that he was a new director into the sales enablement world. We're not hiring anyone else in sales enablement who doesn't have a sales background. And he kept harping on that. And I'm like, you're making me feel like I'm this small. Like now, at the time, we all had a budgeted amount for training. So budget time was coming up. My leader reached out and said, hey, you've got this $3,000 to spend. What are you going to use it for? And I said, you know what, rather than going for a training course, would it be okay if I got some coaching sessions? She said, sure. So I arranged for, I think it bought me 5 or 6 coaching sessions. It was all remote by a woman who lived probably a 10-minute drive from me, all by phone because there was no Zoom back in those days. And it was in one of the calls with her that, again, one of the joys of coaching is that it asks you to come to conclusions. A good coach is going to ask the right questions that's going to get you to come to your own conclusions. And at one point, we're in the middle of talking, and I said, you know what? I am credible, and I do make a difference. She said, stop. Put your pen, get a Post-it note. The Post-it note is still sitting on top of my desk. I am credible, and I do make a difference. I went to San Francisco shortly after that. I had a business meeting there. And while I was there, I hooked up with former vice president of sales who had been a vendor trainer to me. We met for coffee and I said, Tom, I'm really wrestling with this and I don't know how to get over it. And it's because our leader, who he knew well, is saying this. And he's the one who said to me, Gayle, when you're here, I'm looking at things from a very different perspective. And that's what you bring to the table. You bring that fresh set of eyes. We don't need people who live and breathe what we do all day, every day. We need people who can come in from the outside and say, I don't live and breathe. And so therefore I can see things that you may not see. So that's how I overcame my imposter syndrome. And to this day, that's what I do when people reach out for any kind of mentoring. And I've had many people over the years who have said, Gayle, you were so great to work with. I've got some young incoming enablers. You're OG. I'm like, please don't tell me that means OGO. Yeah, it does. You're OG. I'd love for them to learn from you. And that's the 2 tips that I typically share are Sales Executive Council. That's going to give you your board of directors to check in with, are you doing the right things? And the second thing is understand the value that you bring. And that is that you are not immersed in this world day to day. So those are the 2 things I bring to the table when I'm mentoring young incoming enablers about what to think about. Because again, imposter syndrome is huge. And probably you're right. It's probably even more so in women. We don't want to appear to be too vulnerable. Right. So asking might make someone think that we don't understand And I've always challenged myself without a doubt. I'm a hands-on learner. I'm absolutely kinesthetic. I need to do it to be able to see it. So yeah, that's how I've overcome imposter syndrome.